I think the main disagreement that I have with lots of people on the YouTube sphere with regards to electoral politics on like the left-hand side of things is that I'm not voting for the Labour Party. I've left the Labour Party. I have no interest in supporting the Labour Party in its current form, right? And
Right.
I mean, I literally put out a segment on when I was on Novara Media yesterday, getting a lot of pushback, my opinions on electoral calculus or utilitarian calculus around electoralism. And I think that's where my disagreements come with a lot of people on the current direction of the Labour Party. And I'm assuming you have disagreements with that.
Well, yeah, probably. Definitely. Like I say, my whole thing is, look, if you look at a graph of voting intentions, you can look up, there's a couple out there, and basically says, what are you? Are you on the left? Are you on the right? Or are you, I know we're on the internet, so it's a bit of a meme, are you a centrist? But we are in the UK, and we've got to face facts that there are a lot of people who, when they say, what are you? Are you left, right? They would say, I am neither, I am a centrist. And it is 25% on the right, 25% on the left, and in the middle, you've got a massive 30%. To win any general election in the UK, you have to have at least 15 to 20% of that centrist vote. You cannot escape that reality. Like it or not, that is just the reality of the UK voting populace. That is how it is. You've got to attract centrists. You've got to be able to work with centrists. You've got to be able to people with work who may not be as far down the left as you are. I'm fine with that. I would gladly sort of reach out to anyone on the left and say, let's work together. Let's get in power. And then once we're in power, we can do stuff. So I say this all the time on my chat. I'd rather have the next Labour government with Keir Starmer in charge, where I get 40% of what I want, than another Tory government where I get nothing. I think that's a reasonable argument.
So I have two contentions with this mainly. The first of all, I disagree with your description of the way in which our electorate views politics. And I think that saying that there's 25% left and right and 50% centre, I think you probably would admit that that's an oversimplification, but I think it's a dangerous oversimplification. Because I think that for the vast majority of the population, what they describe as being centrist is just, I have my own political beliefs and I don't conform to an ideology. And I think
No, they
what's
do
more
though.
important...
If you speak to these people, they do. They absolutely do have like political ideologies. They will
Well,
fall
of course,
either
everyone
onto the
does,
left
right?
or
But
right of economics, or they will fall probably onto the left of social issues. So
the
these
thing is,
people do absolutely have political ideologies.
But the thing is, I mean,
I disagree
they
with
don't
that
say that they
completely.
do though. Everyone does have a political ideology, right? Everyone is ideological, and that's one of my main critiques of liberalism. I think a lot of liberals fundamentally believe that they are non-ideological when they clearly are, because liberalism itself is an ideology. But people in the street, they do have an ideology that they do commit to, but they don't actually believe that they are, and they just believe that they believe in something like common sense politics, right? Because when you poll on issues, right, when you look at the distribution of where people put their own things that they believe in policy by policy,
Yep, UK is
they actually
overwhelmingly progressive. I agree with you
they,
on that.
they fulfill the top left specifically, right? They
Yep.
like draconian criminal sentences. They want closed borders and low immigration, but they also want nationalising of public resources. They want more state investment, and they don't believe in wholesale privatization. At least not anymore. They used to. There was obviously a craze for that in the 1980s, for example, where it captured the beliefs of the nation, for example. But I don't think that is broadly what the population do really and truly want. And in fact, they showed that's what they want. They wanted state investment when they elected Boris Johnson. They showed that they wanted there to be more investment into our communities in the north, into extra hospitals in the NHS, right, into more nurses, more police officers, which was a core anti-austerity platform that Boris Johnson was promising, which was a result of the Overton window being shifted through the anti-austerity policies that were being pushed from our side in 2017 and onwards, right, 2015 and onwards. And I think that when you look at the polling on these certain issues, right, yeah, 70% want more to renationalised. Even when you look at wealth taxes, you have a supermajority of people supporting wealth taxes. There are loads of these issues, especially on the economy, where broadly the electorate is more left-wing than the policy that we're getting. In fact, massively more left-wing, like way to the left of any of, not just our political class, but any kind of policy that's been passed over recent years. Right? And I think that because of how much failure we've had in economic policy, essentially for 45 years, right? This is not a blue team, red team problem. This is a problem of political ideology of the people who set policy. And that's been that way constantly, regardless of which party is in power. In fact, I would say that in terms of policy platform, there's Economic policy wise, I think there's very little to draw between what we got from the Conservative governments and the New Labour governments outside of like the austerity window of David Cameron and George Osborne from 2010 to 2016. And if we want to reverse the decline in this country, we have to reverse austerity. And that's currently not being provided to us by anybody in the political class.
I agree. I want to reverse austerity. I want a wealth tax, but I disagree maybe how effective a wealth tax would be. I don't know if you know Professor Richard Murphy does an excellent blog called,
Yes.
I think it's tax
Research.
something, I think it's called. He's really good. He did a blog about, if you want a wealth tax, the rich are just going to, find a way around it. It's technically what they do already with a lot of their taxes. I think there's a lot better ways. I think even in that blog, he describes a lot better ways how you can actually tax more effectively the rich. I want a lot of that stuff, but if we are to actually do that, if we are to actually achieve any of that, you can do none of that if you are not in power. And so to do that, we have to build movements. Look at Momentum. Momentum, to begin with, when it got Jeremy Corbyn in power, failed to build any proper momentum or any structures in the Labour Party that would get people elected, that could back Corbyn up, that could support those types of things, and that is where we're failing now. The left has marginally sort of really failed to really build those structures to get those things achieved. Now, I think eventually we will go down that, because I think in the next parliament, we're going to have what I like, a progressive majority. I'm very hopeful that we'll get that, and I think Starmer and the next Labour government is probably going to be a lot more progressive than I think people give him credit for. But that's my hope. I know I can see it in your eyes. I can see it in your eyes already.
I have
hopeful
zero expectation that he'll be more progressive in power. I think he'll be less progressive in power. He has no incentive to be more progressive when he's in power, outside of certain things where he thinks that policy is necessary to win votes due to the actual material outcomes of those policies. Like if he wants to actually improve people's lives, because really and truly people are going to vote based on their material conditions, right? Currently, when we look at the reason why people are leaving the Conservative Party, it's people seeing their mortgage payments go up. It's people seeing their pension funds get tanked by Liz Truss. Like these things that are materially impacting them is what's going to move them across.
But they're not
seeing
necessarily going
shit
to the
in their
Labour
rivers,
Party.
right? I mean, the stats show that they are.
They're not necessarily going to the Labour Party.
All of the polling shows that the core group of like potential swing voters are actually, they're just moving from Tory to Labour. They are people from age 50 to 65, which is the core group that was voting Tory that are now voting Labour, which is the core group of people who still have mortgages that they're paying off and who are also close to retirement. So the pension fund being tanked by Liz Truss massively affected them. This is the biggest group that we're seeing move from Conservative to Labour. And I think this argument, the main argument that I get, I mean, I don't know if this is your argument personally, but the argument that I hear from people is that, well, we can't have progressive policy in the manifesto. We can't have an increase in capital gains tax to equalise it with, or have it closer to income tax. We can't do state investment on new council housing, for example. We can't have these things because if we did, then these people wouldn't vote for Labour at the next election. And I just think that's fundamentally untrue when these things are supported broadly by the electorate. And when you're 20 points ahead in the polls consistently, and the gap is widening month on month as Rishi Sunak becomes one of the most hated prime ministers since, I guess, the last one. This idea that somehow you're putting the potential election win in jeopardy by having bold policy at the time when really and truly the country can see the death of their own country due to failures of Conservative governance. Right? Not Conservative Party governance, but Conservative ideological governance, right? The policies of austerity, the policies of privatisation, the policies of lack of state investment and monetarist fiscal policy. When you look at YouGov polling, people don't support the need to reduce the deficit anymore. That's not part of the popular zeitgeist, and that was shown by how much support was given for Boris Johnson, specifically as a person who was putting forward an expansionist fiscal platform. People want to see investment in public services and into state provision of resources such as council housing, which is not being promised by the current Labour administration or the current Labour leadership.
Yep. So two things there that you've sort of brought up there. If you want to win an election, you've got to pull people over to your side. Like it or not, you've got to reach out. And it is, I think, making sure that, you pull over those Tory lights. Like it or not, as I said, if you look at polls, who are you? 25% on the left, 25% on the right, and then that middle, there's that massive 30% of centrists. Like, you've got to give them something to come over you to when you go into that ballot box and put, the X next to Labour. You cannot win an election if you do not pull people over to your side. You are not going to win an election just on the left by itself. You need to win over centrists. You need to win over the more light blue Tories. Again, like it or not, that's how you win an election. You win elections by winning people over to your side. The next thing is be more bold policy with Labour. I am there with you 100%. I have an absolute man crush on Ed Miliband, because Ed Miliband came out and said, I wish I had been more bold. I wish I'd been more bold when I had been Labour leader, been more bold with my policies. I agree with him. I agree with you now. Starmer needs to be more bold with his policies, because there is a ton of stuff he could do that would be really, really good. I want to see House of Lords reform. I really want to see House of Lords reform. I think that is, if we talk about electoral reform, Westminster, I understand. I think the House of Lords is a far more suitable target to go after first. Then we can go after Westminster second. I think reforming, doing a lot of economic stuff, I agree with you as well. He needs to be really bold. Unfortunately, he is being far too cautious. And I think that comes down to someone called Deborah, what's her second name now? Can't remember her name. Deborah Morhan, I believe her second name is. She's the current director of campaigning and top director of communications as well in the Labour Party. She was namely pulled because she wrote a book called The Red Wall. It's a bit, it's not that very good, to be honest, when it comes to it. But I blame a lot of the indecisiveness and unfortunately not being bold enough on, there are a lot of people just being, I think, too cautious. And I think you are right. They aren't being bold enough. They should be more bold, and they shouldn't be scared of, rising to the challenge on a lot of these issues that we're facing. But at the same time, there was a lot of controversy, as I'm sure you remember, when we had the shadow cabinet reshuffle, and all the people like, oh, well, you've got rid of all these people on the left. But look who got put in. It had been predominantly people who have been in power, knew how cabinet ministers' positions would work, because I think Starmer knows the second he gets in power, he's really got a lot of work to do. I mean, you don't know the kind of traps that the Tories might have left, and the mess that we can't see in the background that, the ministers know about, that we don't probably get to see on a day-to-day basis. So Angela Rayner, I wish Starmer would use Angela Rayner more, because she is really good, probably definitely future leader of the Labour Party, definitely in the future. But yeah, I think she's gonna go. Hopefully, in the future, we'll probably see her as a leader, and probably, definitely, hopefully, next prime minister. I mean, she'd be really good. I really do believe that. And certainly, when it comes to the policy of New Labour, New Deal for New Workers, that's a lot of improvements that we can stand to gain. I mean, we've just lost, unfortunately, if you're on part-time or 0 hours contracts, they've just changed the rules recently that you no longer get holiday time. You've got to start from scratch and earn that holiday time, rather than if you're on full-time, you're automatically guaranteed set of hours. Said we're not going to do that back in. I think, again, just like the the benefit cap? I think that's no goal from Labour, but it's not going to stop me voting for them, because I really do believe in the next Parliament we're going to get a very progressive majority, and I think there's a lot of hope to be done. I really do. I think being negative in politics doesn't get you anywhere. I think you've got to be hopeful, and you've got to look forward, and you've got to get those wins. And the only way you get those wins is being in power and trying to drive that change.
I don't view myself as being negative. I view myself as being realistic. I look at the policy platform that's being put out of me. What was happening at the National Policy Forum, where we have the leadership literally going to war with the unions over watering down the New Deal for workers, right? Not just going to war with the unions who literally fund the party, or at least they did before business funding outstripped union funding within the party, right? But also going to war with their own shadow secretary of state for the future of work over watering down her desires, what she wanted for this stuff, to the point at which she gives a speech at the Trade Union Congress promising things in the New Deal for workers that then get U-turned on the very next week. May not be a huge amount of things that got U-turned on, but still things again U-turned. She's been undermined by her own party, briefed against in the media against her as well, right? I previously was a reasonably big fan of Angela Rayner. I think that despite my misgivings over her political actions in recent months or whatever, I still believe that having genuine people from working class backgrounds high up in the Labour Party is something that is worth doing, regardless of whether I like them or not, given how much of the Labour Party now is just a bunch of middle class liberal types who I really have no desire to see in positions of power, because of the kind of people who they try and pander to and the kind of backgrounds that they're from. But even, and I think that the classism in this country needs to be fixed by having somebody from a working class background in power, rather than having people who don't represent the vast majority of the country legislating for the rest of everybody else. But I just don't see how you can have this what I believe is this kind of naive belief. I mean, again, I know I'm not trying to insult you with this, that somehow by putting him into power when he's promising conservative fiscal economics, that he'll suddenly change and be more progressive once he's in power, given that the reason why he's in the position that he is in is from donations from large business that he got as part of Labour Together, right? Morgan McSweeney's £700,000 that was off the books to literally try and usurp the membership by promising the things that they knew they were never going to deliver. That's what they did research on the membership of the Labour Party to try and do to get Keir Starmer into power, right? And at the top of the Labour Party. Then the donations that they've got from businesses to be able to deal with the fact that the coffers are getting dry because memberships are leaving in their droves because they're not getting what they were promised during the leadership election. And on top of that, we have the current future policy platform.
I actually want to cover that. I really do say this now. Anyone who left the Labour Party because, well, Corbyn stood down, basically. Anyone who left because they are upset about Corbyn, I think you're an idiot for doing so. I really do. If you want to build an actual good Labour Party, you have to be in the Labour Party. You have to push, you have to campaign and join groups within the Labour Party, because that's the only way you change the Labour Party from within. You don't change it from without.
I mean, I disagree.
You've got to be in the Labour Party. You've got to be in those positions. You've got to be able to join those campaign groups, because otherwise, why? What's the point? You've got to be within the party. Momentum was a Labour Party activist movement.
Well, I do agree with you. I do agree that people shouldn't have left just because Corbyn wasn't leader anymore. Leaving because Corbyn wasn't the leader was silly. I agree with you on that. I mean, I never was a member, but I've been in an affiliated union. Right, I was an affiliated union up until a couple of months ago when I quit my job and wasn't part of the sector anymore. I didn't leave the movement. I didn't stop being related to the Labour Party until very recently. But I only left because I realised that my voice was never going to be listened to. And they've changed the structures of the party so that internal groups in the party literally cannot get listened to anymore. The people who are going to be the leader in the future are now essentially going to get decided by the PLP because the thresholds are higher. People in the PLP are getting picked by diktat from the centralisation within the party, right? So that structure is essentially now completely impenetrable. And we know the people who are in charge of the party don't want members to engage. They don't want engagement with the membership. They want to manage the membership. And they admit it to their business parties in the actual lobbying pamphlet they give out through.
Not what I've encountered at all. I've been and talking to Labour campaign groups. They want to talk to them. They want to talk to the people. They want to see what they're saying. This is part of my problem. If you do not engage with your party, if you are not prepared to build the systems and the foundations and the support groups, you will never get any change. If you do not build these systems, there is no change.
My engagement has been through my trade union, and they've just not listened to us. Dave Ward has been very, very clear about the kind of things that we want to see from the Labour Party. And when the trade unions try and negotiate with the Labour Party, they get rebuked, right? Where we had GMB and Unite walking out of the NPF dinner because they were going to war with the Labour leadership over policy. It's that I look at every structure that previously there was some lever to which the people internally within the Labour Party could pull to push policy leftwards, to push policy to be more. I don't even view it as being left-wing policy. I view it as pragmatic policy. I view it as policy that achieves the ends that would make people want to vote for the Labour Party in future, or that would want people to make people vote left in future, right? I agree with you on your points about Ed Miliband. I think he's one of the few good people left in the party because he wants to build popular policy around collective ownership that would then make people further vote Labour. His council, local authority owned energy policy.
Having him there.
Oh, I like it. I think Ed Miliband is fine when he's not being insulted by Keir Starmer in public speeches, which literally happened yesterday, right, or 2 days ago, where Keir Starmer said, "Oh, we lost our track even before Corbyn." Okay, throw your own environment secretary under the bus, right? But I agree that Ed Miliband should have been more bold. But the idea that we win elections from the centre based on the fact that Ed Miliband wasn't being bold and still lost. In fact, he lost because he lost, obviously, seats in certain areas because of the Lib Dem collapse. But he also lost seats in Scotland. He lost seats in Scotland because he wasn't progressive enough. And he lost seats in Leave voting Red Wall seats, right? Where the decline of the Red Wall that was arrested in 2017 but was continuing up until 2015 because the Labour Party was too liberal. It wasn't enough of a workers' party for these people, which was clear during the Blair years when these people moved to the BNP and moved to UKIP, right? That would look more like
you've got
grassroots movements.
This is it. If you're not building these systems, if you're not getting these groups, if you're not going out and you're engaging with these people, I do not see almost zero to very little left-wing activism. I see almost very little in the UK, and that is really depressing. That is really depressing for me to see that, because you could talk so much about, where people want left-wing policy. Then why aren't we voting for people who are left-wing? Why aren't they there? Why aren't we seeing these dramatic left-wing swings, if that's the case?
When we did in 2017, we saw the biggest increase in the Labour vote share in loads of years.
But we
saw a forcing of. I mean, literally, the majority of the country voted for state intervention, and Boris Johnson won the election. Right? Boris Johnson promised them what they wanted. People want 40 new hospitals. They want levelling up.
Yeah, because he was a better campaigner than Corbyn.
Oh, he was an excellent campaigner. I think Boris Johnson. I'm not going to denigrate Boris Johnson's campaign. There is popular desire for state interventionist policy, which I would argue, when we look at increasing funding on things like capital investment in the NHS, 40 new hospitals is something you will never hear come out of Keir Starmer's mouth. You'd never hear it come out of his mouth. It wouldn't. It wouldn't fit into the fiscal rules.
It's not physically possible sometimes to do that. I mean, I think that was a wild promise that Boris Johnson made at the time. I think most of the promises. I think the whole. I don't know if you ever read the Levelling Up white paper report. The first 2 chapters of that are actually absolutely stunning, because it lays out the entire Conservative conceit that they haven't invested in the UK, they haven't had an industrial plan, and they've done nothing to actually invest. And, oh, look, this is actually how much money you need and would like to do that. And then when you get to the Treasury section, it's like, well, we'd like to give you this money, but perhaps not.
I mean, I think trusting the Conservatives to do anything is a fool's errand. I agree with you 100%. Do I think that Boris Johnson was ever going to deliver 40 hospitals and levelling up? No, of course not. In fact, I think levelling up as a policy was essentially just papering over gaping wounds in huge amounts of industrial declining communities. Industrial declining communities were failed by New Labour, that were failed by the Labour government, who've continued the deindustrialisation of Thatcher and the centralisation of our entire economy around London, which led to the global financial crisis because of lack of capital controls, lack of prudential regulation, right? But of course, that's still in the past, but those are the people who needed to be won back, and they weren't won back by Ed Miliband's plea to the centre. And sure, you may say that there was still an electoral loss in 2017, and I would happily admit that. I happily admit that that's true. But what I don't agree with is this idea that means that you have to abandon left policy to then win the election from then. The issue that I have is that in both 2017 and 2019, they were clearly being clouded by Brexit on both sides. I don't think you can really make any claims of how good Labour were in 2017 when they were trying to win, when anti-Tory votes coalesced around them because of Brexit. I don't think you can make 2019 to be some catastrophic loss because of left policy when they had a different Brexit policy platform, which was a result of a gigantic drop in platform, right? In the wake of the 2017 election, Labour were ahead in the polls for like a year after 2017, right? It was clear that left-wing policy was not putting people off. Jeremy Corbyn trying to contact Russia over the Salisbury poisonings, that's what lost him votes. Then prevaricating on Brexit, what lost Corbyn votes, right?
What lost Corbyn votes was the inability to get across these policies. In the 2019 manifesto, and I will say this now, the 2019 manifesto, there was a really good policy to get free broadband, to have, like we have in South Korea. South Korea do this, and they do it fantastically. It is a really good investment that the government invests in broadband, so everyone gets access to broadband, and they view it as a state education tool. That if you have access to broadband, and it's an education tool that all the populace has access to, and it adds billions to their economy every year. When it's in the Labour manifesto that Corbyn wrote, it was an absolute mess. It became an absolute joke. There was a really infamous interview on BBC Radio Sheffield with the boss of PlusNet and the Labour MP at the time. The boss of PlusNet took him to town because he couldn't espouse what the policy was or how it was going to work or anything like that. That's a lot of the work that really needs to be done on a lot of this left-wing. The theory needs to become policy to tell the people, well, this is why you want this policy. This is how this policy is going to work. That is what I think is also
so your argument is that not that the policy itself would put people off, but poor communications on why the policy would be good would put people off. So do you think that somehow the current Labour leadership don't have good enough communications to be able to pull off left-wing policy?
Yes,
Because at the moment,
the current Labour communications, I will admit, is absolutely dire. I was going to go to the Labour conference with Graham and Phil, and we were going to do we didn't. Well, they wanted to do an entire segment on how bad Labour comms is, and the fact that they need to do more, they need to get more engaged, they need to do more social media, and do more live streams, because then you can sort of reach more people and tell people, okay, this is our policy, this is what it is. And I think Phil does a really good job when he does his live streams where he talks about this particular Labour policy. This is why this particular Labour policy is why it's going to be good.
but then this isn't an argument against running on a more left-wing policy platform and purely on economics, right?
I'm not arguing
my-
running on a left-wing platform. I would love Labour to run on a more left-wing platform. But the reality is, at the moment, there is no platform there is essentially no platform. There is no launch point for these policies. You cannot. There is no. Well, wait. Let me think about this. There's no move. Well, there is a movement. But there's no organized movement.
I mean, I don't think whilst I
Really
think that there would be good if we did have one, I don't think that necessitates not having it in a potential policy platform to try and put an election, especially an election where you've been gifted a massive lead in the polls, right?
Yeah, it's been a massive opportunity.
Yeah,
because
literally the lead in the poll is such because of Tory failure, right? Incumbent governments lose elections. It's really difficult for opposing parties to win elections on their own merits unless the current incumbent government destroys their own polling ratings, which is what's happened, right? In the wake of Liz Truss, in the wake of Boris Johnson and Partygate, and of course Rishi Sunak being an unlikable buffoon, really and truly. They've been gifted a gigantic lead, basically, despite the fact that everybody hates Keir Starmer, right? His approval ratings are rock bottom. People don't, not only do they dislike him as a person, they also don't know what he stands for or what he believes. When you listen to people's discussions, they go, well, I want to see more things from him, right? So it's clear, we both agree. We want him to be more bold, and it's also shown it in terms of the polling. People expect him and are looking for him to be more bold in terms of policy as well. So when you look at these things, none of these things, again, say to me that the kind of policy that we both want to see, right, that we both want to see, in terms of like the actual policy itself, regardless of communications, regardless of how it can be sold to the public, but maybe Labour might screw that up, right? Of course, let's just assume that comms is good and that it does get sold to the public well. None of these things are a reason as to why we shouldn't have left-wing policy in the next manifesto to try and win an election. When literally, if it was 2015 and there isn't the Conservative collapse, maybe you do need to be more cautious. But this is the one time where right-wing policy on tax cuts has destroyed the economy. You can campaign on tax rises. When the privatization of our water sector has led to rivers full of shit in our country, you can argue for nationalisation of the water sector. Maybe not first term, maybe second term, but we say our long-term goal is bringing these back under public control. But I fundamentally believe, given how unassailable this leader is, like Keir Starmer is the next Prime Minister, and he can be bold, but he doesn't want to be. And the only fundamental reason I can think of is either because people like Morgan McSweeney are essentially saying that he's not allowed to be, because those are the people who essentially groomed him into the position that he's in at the moment, or because he's not allowed to, because that's what Labour Party's donations hinges upon. His personal donations, the donations of Labour Together, and the actual party coffers at HQ, what they rely on, as well as business investment. And those are the things I think. We literally had Will Hutton conspiring with the CEO of Severn Trent Water to try and stave off nationalisation by approaching the Labour Party with this concept of like social utility firms, right, which are still private but have more like social utility involved in their operation, to try and prevent nationalisation of our water sector at a time when Thames Water is literally collapsing in front of us, and where the Conservative government might have to emergency nationalise them. But these arguments write themselves, and if you let the Conservatives set the narrative at a time when their own ideology has been exposed as a failure, we'll have Conservative policy forever.
Where's the movement? Where are the people pushing this? Where are the MPs? Are we getting the right MPs elected? Are we getting that movement in? Are those people in the
They can't
in the
be
party
elected. They're being taken out of the selection process.
Where are these movements? Where are these movements to sort of push for that? There is none. This is what's so annoying. This is what's so frustrating, because it's the exact same thing you see in America, where they want all these progressive policies as well, but there is no left movement to push for these things.
Bernie Sanders had the most individual donations to a campaign in US political history. There's a gigantic.
And why isn't the left doing that? Why are they donating to the Labour Party now?
They did under Corbyn.
If Bernie Sanders can do that, why can't we do it?
Well, they did under Corbyn, right? We did build them. We've built the biggest political party in Europe, and maybe it wasn't successful, and I admit that it wasn't successful, and lessons need to be learned, right? I don't disagree with that. And then Keir Starmer becomes the leader of the party. In fact, members don't immediately leave, but they start leaving when they start getting turfed out of the party, when they start getting trot hunted. We know from the Ford report they get trot hunted.
Building those platforms to do this because we believe we can, help to influence Labour on that front.
I mean, believe me, I
things.
wasn't done with the Labour Party until very recently. In fact, up until like a year ago, when people in my chat were shouting at me to continue to move away from the party, I was still saying, look, I believe in, that whilst I don't like what's happening under the current administration, I believe that fundamentally, if you want to fight for better workers' rights, it's going to come from the trade union movement. So having a party that's beholden to the trade unions in power is the best way of being able to do that, for better, for worse, even though if they're not giving you good policy. But it's been clear to be shown that the current leadership, which have essentially a vice grip on party control, because the mechanisms by which members can engage and movement can engage have been shut off because of the ways in which they've changed the process of selection. They've changed the process of the way in which members get to set policy.
That's not what I'm hearing when I'm talking to people like Movement Forward. When they're talking with MPs, when they're getting meetings with the Labour Party, how if you're telling me that's not the case, why am I getting a completely different view from someone that I know that is running to get PR on the Labour platform, on the Labour manifesto? Why am I getting
proportional representation? Right? I think there is plenty of Labour MPs who probably do support proportional representation. How many of them support it enough to challenge the current leadership on it? How many of them are going to actually have somebody on, say, for example, on economic policy, which is what I'm focusing on here, because economic policy is what's going to make sure that poor people get to live, they get to put food on their kids' plates, right? PR is something good that I support, right? But that comes second to me to economic policy. Where is the movement in the PLP that's going to challenge the current leadership on that? Because they're not doing it.
I think we are going to get a progressive parliament in the next thing. I think we're going to get a lot of new Labour MPs. And I think these new Labour MPs are going to push more and more to be more progressive. I think we'll get more progressive people in.
I mean,
and I think that will be
fundamentally
what
disagree.
Starmer.
I've been following the selections, and the people who are getting elected into positions of PPCs for the Labour Party, a lot of these people are just people who are related to existing members of the PLP. Wes Streeting's boyfriend got put on the parliamentary selections, and people who had genuinely progressive policy platforms they were putting forward, like Lauren Townsend and Milton Keynes, right? She was somebody who unionised her own workplace as a working class person, right? Supported by multiple trade unions, taken off the ballot for being too left-wing, replaced with Chris Curtis, somebody who's a pollster for opinion, right? Somebody who's just part of the political scene, and not somebody who's like part of the Labour movement, not part of the wider progressive movement either, just somebody who happened to work at a pollster, who would be somebody who would be useful to have in a Labour movement. It's just like how Keir Starmer literally only became an MP because he was a potential Attorney General if Ed Miliband won the election in 2015. That's why he's a Labour MP, was because they wanted somebody who would be a good Attorney General. None of this to me speaks the idea of some big group of MPs for progressive change. Maybe there are plenty of MPs in smaller constituencies that I'm missing, but whenever we find an actual progressive, my personal constituency is Greg Marshall, right? Greg Marshall, somebody who's not like a raging communist or anything, just a genuine person, a local working class socialist, right? Got struck off from being too left wing. And I have a Lewisham councillor who doesn't even live in Broxtowe, who's going to be my PPC. And do I think that this person is anything other than somebody who's just been inserted and parachuted in for being the right kind of candidate? Because it looks to me, and when I speak to people I know who are members of the Labour Party still, my dad for one, the people who are being selected are not being selected based on merit, they're not being selected based on ideology, they're being selected based upon deference, whether or not they're going to be people who are going to be controllable when it comes to being in power. And I understand why. Look at the current Conservative Party, 6 different factions all fighting with each other like rats in a sack, whilst still sitting on a giant majority. And because they can't be controlled, it's looking pretty slapdash in terms of governance. But is that democracy? Is that the kind of democracy that we want to see internally within the party? And will it lead to progressive policy? I can't see how. I honestly can't see how. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm willing to be disproven, but nothing from what I've seen lends to this idea that we're going to see this hugely progressive parliament you claim there'll be.
I think it will. I really do think it will. I am very hopeful when it comes to sort of my politics. That's how I do things. I think you get more done with with hope than more than anything else. I really do am. I really am hopeful, and I think it is, and it can be done. I think we will get that progressive majority, and I think we will see change. And I genuinely think there's a lot of people out there who are coming from a very sort of disappointed, downturned view of just politics in general, that are just going that way and just saying, well, I think it's going to be bad because ... Labour are just, quote, new Tories. No, I think we're going to get a very progressive parliament, the next one. That's why I really do hope for, and that's why I will fight for. If they don't go that way, well, then I will sort of fight, and I will say, that's the ground I want. That's the party I want. That's the progressive movement and the policies that I want to fight for, and I will sort of go forward and I will build those things. So, that's why I support Movement Forward, because I want PR. I think PR would be fantastic if we could get that in. I think that would bring a lot of change to the country. So I really do believe it is possible. And, I know you said, oh, well, that's just naive, but I think you've got to go forward with some hope, or else...
I admire that you admit that it's mostly about hope, rather than more cynical analysis of the situation, right? But to me it feels like a really gigantic wallet inspection moment, really and truly. I just being honest here, I feel like this is you've just been sold some magic beans by people whose main priority is power, and rather than progressive change. Because if they wanted it, they would want to try and instill it in the member base, and they do the opposite, where they disempower their own member base. We know what they do at Labour HQ. It's all in the Ford report. And this attitude they have to their own membership. When Alistair Campbell will literally do a foreword to a document they're giving to businesses saying, please lobby our MPs. The membership is to be managed rather than encouraged, right? These are their own words, and I'd rather take them at face value and be cynical and try and use the levers at my disposal to push things electorally in my fashion by withholding my vote until I see those things in plain English, than promising them my vote without pressuring them when it's clear to me their only desire is to see that vote happen, right? To try and win our vote and then do what they want to do when they're in power, which I believe it. Again, at least you say that it might be naivety, but it's partly hope, and I appreciate that level of candidness. I cannot see it. I just cannot see it in terms of the kind of people who are in control of the party.
Because you and I both would like to see a wealth tax, right?
I mean, I'm more concerned with capital gains tax, but I would like to see a wealth tax as well, yes.
So, yeah, let's talk a wealth tax, because I think capital gains is probably easy to do. I think all they'd have to do is probably just raise the current capital gains tax. I think it's 13%, or is it 12%? I can't remember. It's quite low at the moment.
It stratifies. So capital gain, it's essentially half of income tax, so that the standard threshold is 10%, and then the second threshold is 20%.
So I do agree. It needs raising. But I think you're going to get Starmer, who's going to go into, well, to be honest, quite frankly, a car crash of an economy, and who's going to have to go, probably within the first 2 years, generally sort out this mess. And I think you're going to have to see where do we get the money from? Who has all this money? A lot of the money, of course, we know is held in a lot of physical assets. Getting money out of physical assets, quite hard sometimes. So I think a wealth tax and on stuff on dividends as well is I think that's the right way to go. And I think you will see Starmer have to do that, because, we've lost 4% of Brexit. The economy, I think it was a lot of Tories recently saying, oh, well, look at the economy. We're going well. We're going back on the up. But no, we've had the economy suddenly just lurch to a halt and frozen. And I think you're going to have to see them go in a far more progressive way. We've seen what happens when, you decide to go, full Liz Truss in a sort of a free market fundamentalist libertarian type of way. So I really do think we'll see them maybe not go whole hog. Maybe they will go 30%, maybe they go 30% on sort of, making some progressive economic changes. But that's 30% more than you would see from a Tory government.
They've ruled it out. Rachel Reeves literally wrote in the Telegraph saying, we're not going to do wealth tax, we're not going to raise capital gains tax. They've already said
she's just going to knock you in the face in that.
So you think they're just going to lie to the population? You think they're lying to the electorate?
No, I think that when push comes to shove, when they are in power, they will have to revisit this.
So do you
I
think that
really
they're
think they
naive
do.
about the state of the economy and what they will be able to need to do to be able to create a better economy for everybody? So we'll get into power, look at the books and say, oh, well, actually, all of our promises around wealth taxes and around capital gains tax increases are not going to work with what we want to do for our policy program, so we're going to have to implement it. Is that what you think is likely to happen?
Yeah, I think they're gonna be met by the reality. They're gonna have to really change and really rethink what they're gonna have to do on that. I understand why Rachel Reeves is doing what she's doing. You know, they're having to be very careful when it comes to the economy. This happened before in 1992. You know, Labour were set pretty much to win, but the Tories made absolute hay out of, I think it was the Labour tax policy at the time, and when they were literally probably about to be defeated in a very similar position that we are in now, they made hay out of that commitment that Labour had made at the time, and they pulled defeat out of the fire. But it didn't last long. Like I say, because they went on to lose in 1997. So I really do think it is doable. I think that's what's generally going to happen. I think the realities of government are going to hit them slap bang in the face, and I think you're going to have to see them rethink a lot of things that initially they had written off. And I think that you are going to see more movement, more membership movements come forward and push for a lot more progressive policy and push for a lot more progressive change. Again, I'm a big advocate for write to your MP. Write to your MP constantly. Annoy the heck out of them. Go see them in the surgeries. Go speak to them. Go talk to them. Go engage with your local Labour Party, and not just your local Labour Party meetings. Go to your local town councils, because if you really want to get change immediately, go to your local town councils. Get involved in your local town council.
I mean, I'm all for democratic participation. I'm all for going and speaking to all elected representatives on every level, local authority, whether it be your MP, whether it be your mayoralty, if you're in a particular like mayoral district, right? 100%, absolutely on board with this level of democratic participation. Because in fact, your local authority has loads more power than you think that they do, and a lot of people misapprehend that. That's why Preston is a model that
That's
I
why
would
local councils
absolutely
should get paid.
I would impress upon every Labour council to just copy what Preston do. Preston have really got localism down to a T. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, big fan. Right. I agree. I 100% agree with that kind of thing. The levers that need to get pulled to get position to be changed centrally in the party, it's going to take more than that. And I think that the electoral route is the way in which is going to make the most difference to the people who matter, who have the levers on policy. Because you got to think, right? The people who are currently funding not just the Labour Party but the Labour leadership are the ones who have the most to lose materially if capital gains increases, if a wealth tax is imposed. The people who are currently essentially bankrolling Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves into number 10 and number 11 are the ones whose material interests are opposed by the policies that we want. And I do not see how people who are investing in Labour expecting ROI would continue to give that support if they were then approached with policies that would harm their business interests.
So where's the left-wing, campaign movement? Like, you've got Movement Forward. Where's that left-wing campaign group?
I mean, technically, Momentum still exists, right? But it's the trade unions. They're the left-wing movement. Most people who, even if they aren't members of the Labour Party, they are at least still members of trade unions. The vast majority of us, right? I can't speak for everybody, but Unite the Union still a gigantic campaigning force. In fact, so big of a campaigning force that they've realised that they can't do anything internally with the Labour Party. So have been attacking the Labour Party themselves through their own billboard campaigns and what they feel are swing constituencies, to force Labour to try and move their position on, for example, investment in steel in industrial northern communities, right? That's what they've been doing, because they realise the levers are not there internally within the party. But what they can do...
doing that. Starmer's investing in steel.
And that's as a result, that's literally as a result of Unite the Union.
You've been saying that doesn't work.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that Unite the Union have to take money out of the party and campaign from the outside. They have to attack Labour from the outside, which involves taking money out, taking support away.
You've said that these unions want to sort of move the Labour Party. You've said that they can't, but you've just provided an example where
they can't do it internally. That's what I said. They can't do it internally. within the party. They have to go outside of the party, take money that would be given as a blank check to the Labour Party. They've taken that funding away. Sharon Graham's been specific in saying, we don't want to write a blank check for Labour, and we're going to have our own campaigning fund for our own political goals, right? And they've said, well, we're going to attack Labour, rather than give them money and then try and do things internally, because that's not worked. It didn't work with the National Policy Forum. It was not working on candidate selections. It's not working within the party conference. They just get ignored. So they have to attack Labour and say, Labour isn't helping you on steel. And then suddenly Keir Starmer has to go, well, I guess if they're going to put up billboards that might lose us votes at the general election, then we're going to have to move on policy. And that's what moving outside the party and not doing things internally has led to a success. And that's why I support the trade unions as a bloc rather than their own internal mechanisms within the Labour Party, because they don't exist anymore. That's why I'm very happy to be a member of a different party who do try and impose electoral consequences, which is what Unite would have done. If they were saying to the billboards, what they said was, who supports steel, does Sunak, does Starmer? And if you're a person who's like a single issue voter, like mythical single issue voter on the steel industry in your town, and Starmer and Sunak don't do that, they're going to vote for somebody else. That's an electoral consequence, right? And that is what you have to impose on the Labour Party to get them to change their opinions. Impose electoral consequences, rather than just turning up at membership meetings, trying to influence the National Policy Forum.
That's every election, though.
Yeah, that's why I'm voting for the Green Party. It's an electoral consequence.
You've got to pull people to your side. But you said that the exact example you've just given, you've said doesn't work.
How do you mean? Sorry, explain to me.
An exact example where it does work.
What do you mean? Sorry.
The example that you've given of Unite managing to sort of move Labour over to sort of support the steel industry.
Yeah, because they promised electoral consequences externally from the party. That's exactly it's explicitly what I'm trying to say.
But no,
the internal party mechanisms are not there.
That has an effect on the Labour Party. But you've just said that's had an effect on the Labour Party.
Yes, it has. Yes, we have to oppose electoral consequences, right? My whole point about not voting Labour and voting for another party is because it's also an electoral consequence, right? It is external from the internal party mechanisms.
Who is this other party that's going to win? Who is this other party that's going to win?
Doesn't matter. It does not matter whether my vote leads to a winning candidate or not. What it does is it imposes an electoral consequence. So let's move away from the Labour Party. Let's talk about the Conservative Party, right? 2015 election. In the polls leading up to 2015, Edmund Aban's ahead in the polls. UKIP polling 15% on the back of wanting to get the UK to leave the European Union. In the 2015 manifesto, David Cameron promises a vote on Brexit, and he wins the election because he stops bleeding votes to UKIP. Brexit happened as a result of UKIP campaigning, and they only won a single seat, and it was because Douglas Carswell defected from the Conservative Party. They imposed an electoral consequence on the Conservative Party for not supporting the issue that they wanted to be part of the national zeitgeist. And because they imposed those electoral consequences, the Conservative Party relented, and they literally got Brexit done, and they won nothing. Nigel Farage never won a seat in his life in Westminster, yet the one policy that he has been campaigning for decades, he got in power because he imposed electoral consequences on a party that they would not have had to make that concession if it was done internally. And that's exactly what we need to do with the Labour Party, impose electoral consequences.
Where's this third party then that's going to pull votes away?
The Green Party.
I'm sorry, the Green Party? The party that's only ever had one MP in 20 years?
Yeah, the UKIP only had one MP in 20 years.
That's never come higher than what, third or fourth?
They used to poll at 3%.
The Green Party is going to storm to victory?
No, they're not going to storm to victory. They're going to impose electoral consequences, right? UKIP
it's never imposed an electoral consequence. The Green Party has never imposed an electoral consequence.
UKIP didn't until 2010, right?
They will have no Green MPs because she's winning because of her name alone in that seat. The Green Party are going to impose no electoral victories on you.
They won't if you keep voting for the fucking Labour Party whilst they give you nothing of what you want. Of course they're not going to impose electoral consequences. If continual liberals and centrists continue force left-wing people to cuck themselves out to the leadership of a party that does not care about them, does not support their own principles and what they want to see happen, right? Because they keep saying, you can't vote for another party because you're splitting the progressive vote. You're not voting tactically, right? That's what will continue to happen, right? And that's what UKIP voters decided they were not going to stand for after being told forever they had to suck it up and vote Tory. They then decided not to.
You're also going to split the left-wing vote? You're also going to split the left-wing vote?
Yeah, I am going to split the left-wing vote. I'm happy to split the left-wing vote because otherwise I'm
So
going to be
that means
voting
the
for
Tories
continual
will
neoliberal
gain power.
monetarism.
That you happy to would you be happy to split the left wing vote at the next election and let the Tories continue on for another 4 years?
It's not going to happen. Keir Starmer's not losing the next election because people on the left are voting for the Green
No,
Party.
I'm just saying, if that was to happen at the next election, would you be happy to split the vote and let the Tories win the next election?
I mean, it depends what the polling looked like. It depends on whether I think that the consequence of
I
a broad
don't care about
movement
that.
kneecapping the
The
Labour Party
question
would do
is,
that. No, it's consequential
would
based
you
upon
split the vote
situation, right? Everything
and
is
let
responsible.
the Tory party win the next election?
I'm not speaking about. I can't. That's why I can't deal with idealists, right? And we have to live in material reality of what the
I'm not
consequence
an
and
idealist.
utility
That
of.
is the reality. You would split the vote.
No, you are, but as an idealist philosophy, not like idealism, like idealist philosophy, right? We are saying that, well, the issue is your idea is wrong rather than the material consequence and the utility of what you're proposing is, right? My vote against the Labour Party is entirely a consequence of the material reality that we live in currently, right? Because in 2015, right? Happy to vote Labour, right? Despite the fact that Ed Miliband was literally promising continuity austerity. Ed Balls very essentially offering Osborneism light in terms of the shadow cabinet, but the election was going to be close, right? I think there is more utility in trying to prevent the potential Conservative win, given how damaging austerity was in 2015, right? But there's no reason to do that when Starmer is 20 points ahead in the polls. No reason whatsoever to just vote for him because for the risk of there being some kind of splitting the vote on the left, because it's not happening. He's already winning the votes of Conservatives by pandering to them with Conservative policy, Conservative narratives, and Conservative rhetoric.
Well, I don't see the left suddenly running to the Green Party either.
To be fair, they've doubled their position in the polls, right? They used to poll on 3%, they're now around 7 or 8%, which is not a huge amount, but it's only slightly shy of where UKIP were to influence the policy platforms of the Conservative Party in 2015, right? And
that is the barely they've ever done. This happens every single time. After the local elections, oh my God, look how well the Green Party have done. Look how well they've done. Surely this time we'll get another MP. But no, they never do. They are not a serious threat. They are not UKIP.
They're not now, but they might be future down the line, right? And if you just continue saying, I'm going to support Labour centrism, regardless of how they treat me in the party, they treat my ideology, and who they try and pander to with policy, right? They'll never be. They'll never be.
Exactly said that you can move Labour more to progressive policies.
Yes, by offering electoral consequences. That's literally what I've been arguing.
No, you talked about campaigning that your group said, I'm going to sort of push Labour for more progressive policy on the steel industry. They have done that.
By not internally, externally through electoral consequences.
No, they weren't a party. They were not a party. The union is not an electoral force.
They're not an electoral force, but they were threatening Labour on losing votes in steel constituencies by making it a key issue that if they didn't support, they would lose votes to somebody who would support it, right? That isn't still an electoral consequences being campaigned on from outside.
They managed to move the party over to that. They weren't saying, go vote for someone else. They were saying...
But if so they were saying that this party doesn't support you, and the result of that would be electoral consequences, right? They weren't saying vote for somebody else explicitly, right? It's because they're a union, not a political party. But they were saying that this party doesn't support your interests, which if it's important for these people in this constituency and wasn't be supported by Labour, would lead to electoral consequences. People would move away from Labour if this isn't the party of the steel industry. If they're a single issue voter and some other party was coming in and offering it, right? Do you see what I mean?
But the Green Party isn't a single issue party. It's to be honest.
But I mean, it's a broader issue of left wing fiscal policy rather than specifically the steel industry. But it's the same principle.
Yeah, no. The idea that the Green Party is going to become some sort of UKIP and pull a UKIP Brexit type coup. No. That's fantasy. That is a genuine
now.
Fantasy.
But it was fantasy. It was fantasy for Keir Hardie when he was polling at 2% in the early 1900s, right? That was fantasy for the Labour movement, and then because people believed in what they were offering and believed in the policy platforms being put forward, they grew in the movement.
The Labour Party to more progressive policies by focusing on the Labour rather than focusing on a party that will not win, not get any MPs, and will never come higher than 4th.
Again, they will only never come higher than 4th if you continue cuck yourself out to a centrist Labour Party. Like, I don't know how many times I can say this, because you are not offering them anything that meets their material interests by consistently saying you're going to vote for them regardless of what they say to you. I'm sorry, I don't know how I can explain this in more simple terms.
Well, you're not explaining how somehow the Greens are going to sort of becoming a serious electoral force to get enough votes to force Labour to change.
This going to take campaigning, which I am doing. This is literally what my channel is, right? I literally use my channel to talk about. I was literally on Novara Media yesterday, a channel with 600,000 subscribers, almost 600,000 subscribers, talking about why I believe people should vote for the Green Party for this specific reason, right?
They're not exactly the biggest fans of Labour at the moment.
No, of course they're not. Why would they be? Like, I'm not a fan of the Labour Party. I'm a leftist.
Imagine if
they
actually were, and sort of maybe pushed, more people in Labour to sort of support progressive causes and to sort of campaign within the Labour Party to support more progressive causes.
I mean, they did that and they got rebuked, right? Or they got expelled from the party for being too left-wing. They voted for Keir Starmer on the promise of those policies, and he just completely gave up on them.
I so far have agreed with you a lot of these left-wing policies. Why haven't I been expelled from the Labour Party? If left-wing people are getting expelled left, right, and centre from the Labour Party, why haven't I been expelled?
I'm not sure why. It's not specifically some people do it, some people that don't, right? But it's very clear that people of certain dispositions within the party are not welcome within it, right? And even so, even if they don't get expelled, do they get listened to? Is any of their policies being put forward? And we've seen from the rhetoric that the party conference means nothing.
You've given a good example of how you can move Labour.
Externally,
so why
yes.
is there no left-wing platform that's building support within the Labour Party? Because there are plenty of groups in the Labour Party that are building support, that are working with Labour MPs to build support, get policy on the books, to move forward for that. That is more effective, to build movements.
I mean, Momentum is technically still there, still doing what they're doing. Are they getting very far? Not really.
I think they are. I think they're getting more further than you're giving them credit for.
I mean, maybe I'm happy to be proven wrong on this, but I'm looking at every single policy that's being proposed and I'm not seeing it reflected in the potential future manifesto.
Well, we'll see what happens when the manifesto comes out. I think it's going to be quite a good manifesto. I think it's going to be more progressive than I think people think it is.
I'm happy to be proven wrong. I would welcome being proven wrong. I don't want the Labour Party to suck. I don't want Wes Streeting being talking about the introducing more of private sector in the NHS. I don't want this, right? I would much rather have a Labour Party that didn't have this stuff, and I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to see progressive policy reflected in the Labour Party manifesto. But every logical part of my brain is telling me that that's just something that will never happen, given the material interests of the people who have control over the levers of what policy looks like.
I constantly hear from the left that, but I'm also hearing people not willing to put the hard work in, to go and campaign, to go do the sacrificing that is necessary to go and affect a lot of those changes.
I mean,
it can be done, but it's going to take a lot of work.
I mean, the evidence I've seen
of this... The only way you do that is within the Labour Party.
I mean, the evidence I've seen of this is when the potential for that happened. We literally, the whole reason why we're here, the video that was put out, we've seen that in the case in which the people who made those campaigns, who tried to push that policy, when they had the chance of having somebody be put into power who supported those policies, we have somebody from the electoral caucus within that party who disagrees with them, saying she'd bring down the government and if that was something that would happen, right? Margaret Hodge literally said, I would try and bring down the government. And
one person.
I mean, that's one person openly saying that thing specifically, but we also had
You've got several
all of the evidence
that have been in the past couple of days in the Tory party.
Yeah, the Tory party are also shit for this as well. The Tory party Tory party don't listen to their members either. That's also something that's true. But we also have all of the leaking of things to the press about anti-Semitism, which was explained in the Ford report. We have the Ergen House Room, where they literally misappropriated funds towards their candidates rather than left-wing candidates. We already have things like people getting trot hunted by Labour HQ. We know all of these things were happening internally within the party to try and kneecap the left, not over reasons of pragmatism, but over reasons of factionalism. We already know the text between people like Emily Oldknow and Ian McNichol, all of these people who were involved in the Chakrabarti report, in all of the leaked messages. We know the attitude these people have to people who do want progressive change in the party, right? And to the point at which they are upset at the 2017 result being surprisingly positive. Not a win, but they were upset the potential that Jeremy Corbyn or his wing of the party, those kind of policies, would continue to be the mainstay of Labour policy. And that wasn't because they were doing badly, but
you know
what
I'm hearing
well.
Again we did it once and we can't do it again because just too hard. Let's just pack up, go home, and maybe we'll support the Green Party, which won't work.
I mean, I said, again, literally, if there were mechanisms within the party internally to see those things change, I'd support it. But those avenues have all been shut down, and explicitly shut down for this reason as well, right? There's a reason why Starmer was trying to get it changed to an electoral college rather than one person, one vote for the leadership of the party.
Yeah, it failed.
There's a reason why they're interfering with parliamentary candidate selection, and it's to try and stop these things from happening.
And I don't think they've really succeeded that well. There are left-wing candidates in Labour that I think are going to do some very good jobs. I think you've got Oliver Coppard in Sheffield Mayor for South Yorkshire. He's very left-wing.
The mayor, sorry. I mean, the mayor. I mean, I've had pretty good relationship with the Labour mayors. In fact, the Labour mayors have been the good thing about the Labour Party. I've been open on my channel about the need to support Sadiq Khan. Obviously, you look at, if we're going to talk about mayors, why we're not talking about Jamie Driscoll, for example, somebody who's not even particularly left-wing, right? But somebody who supported the previous iteration of the Labour Party was expunged for somebody from who has said pretty racist things on Twitter, Kim McGuinness. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about with people who don't even support necessarily like the far left, quote unquote, but somebody who supported like the kind of localism that we both support in Preston being removed because he's too left wing. That was it, right? And not even somebody particularly left wing either.
I disagree. I think there are a lot more progressive people in Labour than you give credit for. I really do. And I think we're going to have a very good parliament next time. I really do. I think we're going to have a very progressive parliament. I think a lot of people are going to be surprised. And to be honest, I think you'd far better spend your time working within the Labour Party to sort of get these changes effective, because the only way you're going to affect these changes is if you work within the Labour Party. Because I've been talking with people who are campaigners within the Labour Party, like Movement Forward, who have had good success conversing with MPs, getting meetings with the Labour Party. You're telling me this is impossible? I know people who are saying it's not, and it's doable.
Yeah, and yet we still have even people.
I've got a very different experience to you on that.
I mean, even the people who represent our section of the party, like Angela Rayner, who we both agree is somebody who we have, at least some amount of respect for. Even she won't support proportional representation, which is what the Movement Forward are there to try and do, to try and push for PR.
We need more pro-Labour PR MPs in. That's another thing we need, more pro-Labour MPs. We need to really start changing minds. And I think it's not Westminster we go after first, it's the House of Lords we go after first.
I mean, I agree. We all want House of Lords reform. I think that's something that basically every single person in the country agrees on at this point, because it's so like horrendously anti-democratic. I think that's true. I think that is true. But there's two problems I have. First of all, is that again, what's going to stop the current Politburo at the top of the party stopping our progressive MPs being put onto selection ballots when they support PR? And second of all, even if they do, why would anybody who leads the Labour Party support proportional representation when it's not within their material interests to do so? Just like how Blair literally had it in the manifesto in 97 and promised to change to PR and then never did it. Why? Because it wasn't in his material interests.
This is why you've got to have movements. This is why you've got to have movements that do this thing, that support these things, that talk about this. If you don't have these movements, and I'm not going to lie, there's not a lot in the UK. There's not a lot of like left-wing movements in the UK that
it gets
really
voted on at conference every single time, and it's never been policy since 97 when it was policy and then was never implemented.
Doing it. You've got to keep that hard work.
And continue to get rebuked by leadership who will tell you it's not in the material interest of the party, because it's not in the material interest of the party. Like not even my preferred leadership supported PR.
You've got to convince them it is. That's the whole point of politics.
It will never be unless Labour are like 20% of the polls. It will never be in their material interest.
You've got to put the hard work in to do it.
Well, literally, first past the post is exactly why we're having this conversation, where you are literally going to vote for the Labour Party regardless of what happens, right? Yeah. Regardless of how right-wing they go, you'd still vote for the Labour Party, and it's because of first past the post, and that is their literal material interest and why they won't support electoral reform.
The Labour Party is not that far right-wing. I will disagree with that. They are left-wing centrists at best. They are left-wing centrists.
Monetarist fiscal policy, imperialist foreign policy, and reactionary social policy is not my idea. Yeah, they support. We literally have the current leader of the party refusing to call out the war crimes of a government that our current government is supplying arms to, whilst carrying out ethnic cleansing.
They've said, Israel shouldn't be doing this.
Yeah, after like hundreds of after like 20 odd councillors resigned, except they won't say exactly what is bad. They won't call out the forced displacement of people. Like forced transfer is still a war crime. They won't call out.
They need to do that.
They just say Israel has a right to defend itself within international law, yet they continue to break international law every single day. And they just say, well, they need to have aid in, need to have a humanitarian pause. We had a humanitarian pause, and then it stopped, and the war crimes are continuing again. Starmer's position that he takes is like identical to like Anthony Blinken. Like the moment that Blinken changes his position, Starmer changes his position, right? We were essentially entirely beholden to the American foreign policy establishment on this one.
Yeah, and I think that's wrong as well. I think Europe's far more.
So it's imperialist foreign policy. Okay, thank you for agreeing with me.
Russia and Ukraine.
But do you want to shout out your socials and your channel to my chat?
Yeah. Hello, I'm Bowler Hat Man. Come join me for some hopium. Come get the good stuff. We keep it all in Yorkshire. But yes, come join me. I'm on YouTube at Bowler Hat Man. I do use Twitter occasionally. But I'm more on Threads, so come and join me on Threads. You'll find me under the same username. But yeah, no, like I say, I enjoyed this sort of conversation with you. I think it's good to have these types of conversation with sort of people like you. So it's good to sort of, I'm very much about reaching across the aisle and reaching out to sort of people like you. So yeah, I hope we can have a sort of a conversation like this maybe again in the future. Maybe
yep, always happy to join people on the channel. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's reasonable. I mean, if you're in with the Labour Social guys, the kind of people who I also have these kind of disagreements with, so I guess Graham is probably more open to chatting than Phil is, because I know Phil just doesn't care about people who don't share his opinion. So
no, but yes, I'm like I say, more than happy to sort of have that sort of chat, and yeah. So yeah, no, like I say, thank you for having me, and
no worries.
We'll see you soon for tea.
I'll see you on the next one. Take care.
As we say up north, cheerio.
Cheerio. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership. It's just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.